Apple and Tesla are now leading the market lower, probably because of what Bullard said right over here. But Apple got even worse news, and it looks like China is going to ban everyone in government from using any kind of Apple device. When it comes down to it, news is great, but I'm going to get into the charts. We're going to be touching today on Apple and Tesla first, maybe move into some rates, and then we're going to get to those indices, the SPY and the Qs next, okay? So let's get to it. If you were subscribed and you saw my video yesterday, I told you that this needed some kind of pullback. This thing was ticking way up and up and up and up into the upside after this pullback here, and we got nothing in here except for this little one here. So what I told you in yesterday's video was we are most likely needing to go find some buyers. Even if you were a bull, you wanted this to pull back like this. It pulls back, hopefully, into this area is what I first stated, and then we go up into the CPI. But what I said I really wanted to happen in my overall theory was we need to go find some serious buyers. And so I felt we needed to at least go down to the trend line, which is down towards our support level here as well. So it wouldn't be too insane for this move to actually move a tiny bit lower and touch the support. This is more of a support range at this point if you go back in time. And then I do believe we're going to see that extension into the CPI, even though this was a very scary move. The last thing on Apple I want you guys to pay attention to is this reaction off of this, I guess I would say, small support zone and the trend line that I drew. We, in the last hour here, saw this big pop that is giving us a chance to, in the short term, to know that there are buyers in this area. We could pull back again to find even more buyers, but overall, I'm seeing this as a reaction sign that we have more upside potential before the CPI, even though people after today might be screaming at you that there is going to be a crash, and there well could be a crash. I mean, who's to say that this doesn't produce a small bounce and then we tear down again? It's just not my theory. But overall on this, we get to give ourselves a big thumbs up, especially if you were subscribed yesterday, because we said this and exactly this has happened. And now we're getting a reaction off of this trend line, and I believe we will extend higher into that CPI. And I've officially, after this move, marked the CPI date, Wednesday, September 13th, on my chart on every single indice that I'm paying attention to and that I'm going to show you in this video. The next big thumbs up we can give ourselves is Tesla, because on Tesla, we actually broke into the smallest of time frames in yesterday's video, and I told you there is divergence here on the MACD, and we're even getting some divergence here and here on the RSI that could lead to a pop to the downside. We even went into a 15-minute chart here, and let me just remove this. We saw that we were starting to get red bars on this histogram right here that were just peaking, and I said, oh, this looks like we could see some type of downward move. Yesterday we said this and the move did play out. We thought that Tesla would need to come find some buyers in this area or possibly even go down into the support here before it goes up into the CPI release. Now, if we just break this down, let me erase that. If we break this down into a 15-minute, we're starting to see that this thing looks like it once again is just trickling up almost, if you want to consider this some kind of flag here, it is starting to coil up again, which means we're open to a big move. That move could play out to the upside, but overall, from what I'm seeing, because people are pretty fearful after today, maybe early in the morning, we get that downside turn into this pocket of support, and then we launch higher into the CPI. I overall don't think that the crash is happening right in front of you right now. I believe that we just got two pieces of bad news that shook a bunch of people out of the market. Since the 5-minute is what we use to find this move and kind of the 15-minute, we're going to look at it again, and we're starting to see it coil up one more time, almost flagging here. Here is something that we could pay attention to, a divergence, but there's something that I like to talk about in my videos, and that's called significant divergence. And I'm going to be telling you guys in the future what numbers I consider to be significant divergence. But this right here, since it's so just flat and there's no real motion to it, I'm not necessarily paying attention to it. I wouldn't be surprised for this to drop from here. I actually wouldn't even be surprised if this just started extending to the upside, and today was all the pullback that we got. If you're subscribed, give yourself a pat on the back, because we called this happening and you guys stayed in tune for it. So I really appreciate you guys watching the video all the way through to get to that Tesla part. But we are still in the positive territory on the MACD. We're above 50 on the RSI. We came down, we found those buyers, which was right near all those moving averages. And now I believe we will see that extension into the CPI, where I believe either at the CPI or just after the CPI, we will be going to this gap fill or going to fill the gap and then we will see the rug to be pulled on the entire market. And at that point, you want to be very careful with your money and look for divergences to the downside, because you could be caught in one of the biggest bull traps that we're going to see, because I think this will get very vigorous to the downside on most tech stocks as the CPI starts to be released and or after the CPI is released. I think I said last thumbs up, but there might be a thumbs up on every single chart because we were just on fire on this. And on Friday last week in my video, I actually stated I believe that the I believe that the VIX needed to pop higher right here, and it did, right into about the level that I said it would, and then it would consolidate, maybe even retest, and then have one more pop higher. And in yesterday's video, we actually did get to see that retest on a 30-minute chart. We saw a reaction. We saw the MACD starting to curl up, and it was my theory that this thing was going to go up into this trend line here. It's a very short-term trend line, but it is a trend line. And then we were going to see some kind of upward move in stocks, which would cause the VIX to drop. And then we would come down into these areas, giving us another divergence here. But overall, I was telling you to look for some kind of divergence at this level. And right now we see this upward move, but we are seeing on the MACD, it is starting to flatten out, even come down a little bit. Okay, so this divergence actually would be considered significant in my mind on the VIX. Sometimes divergences with the VIX is a little wonky, but overall, I still use it to trade. And I believe that because we see this divergence here, we are going to see that push higher over the next few days, which will cause the VIX to stay at lower levels. The reason you're seeing some turmoil in the market, part of it is because Bullard actually came out and said that there might be one more rate hike, or he suggests that there should be one more rate hike before the year is ending. So that caused rates to up here. But we called it way back last Friday that this thing was going to pop because of TLT, which we'll pull up next. And this thing did rip higher right into the level we said. I said that we possibly will get some sort of retest out of this. I guess it's a sort of a thin wedge. And then we will see one more extension to the upside. And this is where I thought that it would start to taper off, but we saw some flagging happen. If we were paying attention, this thing popped a little bit higher. But as all of this is happening, we can start to see that the MACD is starting to get a downward trajectory. It is starting to get that divergence on the hourly time frame, which is pretty huge. Now, this divergence didn't hold true here, but we do possibly have it here if we are able to get a downward move in the short term. I believe this will play out to the downside. And if we just zoom out, I can tell you where I think this is all going. For now, I'm going to erase my big thumbs up because it's in the way, but even though we do have this buy signal, we have the MACD turning up like it could go, I still believe that we're going to get one more fake out to the downside on the 10-year yield to get stocks to pop higher before that CPI. I believe that this will come down, possibly testing this area right in here, which is the bottom of its upward channel it's had for the past year. And once it does that, we are going to start to see the CPI come in and give inflation back in the market, and we will see this rip higher, giving us possibly a divergence to play in the future to the downside on the 10-year yield. Now, this thumbs up was because if you were paying attention, I think it was an entire week ago, we noticed these highs here and we said it is most likely going to break out and cause rates to raise. And that's exactly what happened. We opened up below with a big gap and we went all the way down to where I thought we would start to consolidate. And once I start to see consolidation, I told you that we are most likely going to try to go fill that gap. That hasn't happened yet, but as you can see right in front of us, we are coiling up one more time, and there's only one thing that's keeping me from saying that this will go lower, and that is because I believe yields will come down. And if you notice today, this is something you can pay attention to that no one else really does, okay? The 10-year yield popped up 2.61%, but TLT actually went up 0.25%. And that tells me that even though the 10-year yield is higher, the bond traders who are known as the smart money, they actually don't see this move to the upside in yields holding for very much, because if they did, they would have sold this off. If bond traders believed in this move of the 10-year yield to the upside by 2.61% in a day, this actually should have probably come into our lows here, which would have given us a divergence on a little bit higher time frame, and then maybe we'd have seen that extension into the upside. But for now, we didn't get that, and that is something to pay attention to. Are yields going to pop even higher and actually give us that after this consolidation we're seeing here? But right now, I'm seeing oversold. I'm seeing green bars on the MACD for an hourly chart. This means that we do have potential from here, maybe after a small gap maybe to fill this gap here and then extend higher. But overall, we could just go straight up into this resistance here. And then we kind of have to see from there what's going to happen. So make sure you're subscribed, because I will be breaking down this exact thing in every single video. And if you're not paying attention to the TLT and yields, you need to be. Now, we've been killing it on SPY ever since I started this channel. We actually said that this move upward most likely was going to gap resistance. That's exactly what it did. It actually tried to go there once, came back, and then fully went there, and then started to sell off with Friday's data last week. Now, from here, I said we could see the bounce from here because this trend line that I see as sort of relevant could hold. But overall, I saw we needed to go find some buyers and dip down into this previous resistance, now becoming support, before we launch higher into that CPI day and possibly fill one of the gaps up here. Now, the thing is with us getting this right is look how right we were. It literally came down on a 2-hour chart, touched that 50 moving average, and then is bouncing off of it. So I believe that possibly in the short term, for this pullback, it might be done and we are extending into the upside into the CPI. Maybe we get a short squeeze into the CPI, because Apple is actually has the potential to recover because they are releasing that new iPhone 27 or whatever the fuck it is. And we're going to see that on Tuesday, just before the CPI, which might be something that extends us to the upside, gets us way overextended, and then we get the rug pulled beneath us and we just go boom to the downside. Just so I cover a little bit shorter time frame for you on this, we are seeing this pop. Now, a lot of the times with these types of pops, I tell you that there likes to be a second dip, or a double dip, if you will. So this bounce up actually could just turn this MACD around for a little bit, and then we could come back down to find a second batch of buyers that then extends us into the upward area by the CPI. So just be ready, because even though there could be a small pop, small pullback again, I do still believe that this thing is going higher. And we get another thumbs up because I actually, once this little high here was broken, I told you that this thing is most likely going to go up and test this broken trend line right here. And it looks like we did exactly that. We came up into gap resistance, we fell off, and then we perfectly tested that trend line right here, and then we started to fall off. And as we started to bounce, I then made a video telling you it looks like this thing needs to go find some buyers. It looks like it was weak and it couldn't extend to the upside any further. If it did, I thought the market was going to be in a lot of trouble. But since we did get that pullback, it's proving everything that I'm saying. We actually came back into this resistance, and I even told you that this thing most likely will cut out of this consolidation and touch here, because this is where a bunch of buyers are. It's a good support line, and then we will see some sort of rip into the upside. This move here was most likely to fake people out to the downside. The last thing I want to touch on the cues is just that second dip scenario, okay? A lot of the times when you see this little bounce here, there is still some fear in the market, so we could easily see a tiny dip in to find even more buyers to then push us up into the upside by that CPI, possibly giving us a nice short squeeze, because I think a lot of people are going to put some puts in right now, especially after how bad Tesla and Apple looked at the end of the day. Bitcoin's not something that I cover all the time, but I'm going to throw it in as a bonus. And this is the only thumbs up we don't have because I don't have very many predictions on it. So overall, what I see happening is we got a ton of bad news today. Apple's tanked, Tesla tanked, a lot of stuff tanked. But what did Bitcoin do? It did nothing. It sat, it's indecision, it doesn't know what it wants to do, and that's why I still believe that we could see that extension up into this broken trend here to then bring us to the downside by that CPI date. Sometimes Bitcoin likes to lead the market, which means we could see this thing just keep consolidating, pop a little bit, keep consolidating until that CPI release, and then we see a downward move, possibly even before the CPI date, because Bitcoin sometimes does lead the stock market. If you like Bitcoin, I do an extensive breakdown of Bitcoin, like a 5 to 10 minute breakdown of Bitcoin every single Saturday. Okay, so if you want some Bitcoin news or any update like that based on the charts here, please tune in, subscribe so that you can see that video every single Saturday. So what's the main takeaway from this video? I believe that we completely got the pullback that I saw coming, and now we're at the levels where we could see that bounce into the CPI, but we should not be surprised if stocks would like to come lower. We want to be open to all scenarios and trade like water. Just move around those rocks, okay? Stay with the stream. Make sure to mark that CPI date, September 13th, on your calendar. I believe that's the biggest catalyst. Hopefully, you guys found something helpful. And if there's any stock you guys would like me to break down that you personally want to see, trade, or invest in, please put that in the comments. I hope you guys found something helpful. Peace.